Stu Tingley really got us all interested. He's such a passionate guy and shares with everybody. So it's been more than a quarter century, I guess, that I've been chasing dragonflies and damselflies in New Brunswick. And I even have a few pictures that I'll share tonight from way back then, which were slides, and eventually I scanned them. But most of the pictures in the show are more recent from the digital age. And I also tried to include a lot from the Miramichi area. So I put locations with the pictures. I would like to invite people to interrupt throughout the presentation, because I get talking and sometimes I don't stop. So feel free to interrupt. I'll try to talk slowly, and there are a lot of pictures. It's better to have too many than not enough. So some of them I'll go through quickly, and others I'll stop and share a little anecdote about a particular species, so on. So would you like me to start the slideshow now?
Yes, perfect.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So here we are. Okay, and so the title here is a little bit of a word game, because the two different suborders of Odonata are the Zygoptera and the Anisoptera, which works out very nicely because that's A to Z. So the Odonata are comprised of three suborders, two of which we have in North America: the Zygoptera, which are the damselflies, and the Anisoptera, which are dragonflies. And without getting too scientific on you, Anisoptera means unequal wings, and Zygoptera means same wings. And that's actually a really good way to distinguish between a dragonfly and a damselfly. As you'll notice, the damselfly on the left has two pairs of equal wings. They are the same shape, same size. And the dragonfly on the right has its fore wings are longer and narrower, and its hind wings are shorter and wider. So that's one big characteristic that distinguishes the dragonflies from the damselflies. Other things include the damselflies, their wings are, their eyes are set apart on a stalk, whereas most dragonflies, their eyes touch on top of the head, as you see in this picture. And dragonflies, generally, when they're perched, they spread their wings. But damselflies tend to fold their wings over their back, except for this subfamily of damselflies called the spread wings, or family of so it allows us to see their wings better in this case, but most damselflies have their wings folded over their back. So here's a typical damselfly from our area, the northern bluet. Its eyes are on stalks, wings folded over the back, and the wings, all four wings, are the same shape and size. I think it's a good point to introduce an interesting fact for New Brunswick, which is not a very big part of North America. We currently have 144 species recorded here. And that sounds like a generous amount. Another way of understanding how generous it is that Europe as a continent, including all those countries, 20 plus countries, has 138 recorded species. So we have a greater diversity of Odonata here in tiny New Brunswick than in all of the continent of Europe. And a question that might follow is, why do we have so many here and not so many in Europe? Well, Odonata, dragonflies and damselflies, are quite sensitive to habitat degradation. And people have been living in Europe in higher densities for a very long time. So nature has been much more degraded, you could say, particularly aquatic habitats where dragonflies and damselflies live. So that's an interesting fact, I would say. So in a way to confirm the exceptions or the differences, not all dragonflies have eyes that touch on top of the head, and not all damselflies have wings that fold over their back. This is a picture taken on the Bartholomew, and you notice that the eyes are separate. It's thought that snaketails and clubtails, that family of dragonflies, are more primitive. So this is a more primitive state where having the eyes that don't touch on top of the head for dragonflies. It's also fascinating to have a closer look at their reproduction. So what has to happen for the dragonflies to reproduce, and damselflies, is that the male that you see in blue on the right holds the female behind the head with a set of claspers, and the female curves her abdomen toward the copulatory organ on the male's chest. So the sperm from the male actually comes out of the end of its tail, but he has to deposit the sperm into his copulatory organ under his chest. So, and then when the two are connected, that's when the female's eggs are fertilized. They can actually fly together in this way, and it's mostly the male that's leading the flight, but the female also helps with her wings. So it's quite interesting to see that happening when they're connected in the wheel or the heart position or heart shape. And some dragonflies really do have that, what we would call the caricature of a heart when they're in the wheel position. And it's actually thought that shape is what led to making when you say you make a heart shape, when you draw a heart, when you love a post, for example, that shape is thought to originate from what dragonflies do when they're mating. So at least that's one possible explanation. Another really interesting fact is that the claspers at the end of the tail, as you see here on the right, two different species. Each species of dragonfly, the male, his claspers are meant to only be able to properly grasp the female of his own species behind the head. So it's a little bit like a lock and key, or anyway, it's pretty specific, species specific. Dragonflies and damselflies are aquatic for most of their life. And so their eggs are laid in the water or in a plant on the edge of the water. And when the little larvae hatch out, they're pretty well able to swim around using some pretty neat adaptations. So dragonfly larvae, dragonfly larvae.
To be out tonight.
Oh,
No,
I'm
you
hearing-
my dog.
I'm hearing somebody new coming in.
No, it's under my dog.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll just make a pause here. The dragonfly larvae actually breathe in through their rear end, and their gills are inside there, and they'll actually expel water forcefully through their rear end, which is basically jet propulsion. Whereas damselflies on the bottom there, they wiggle back and forth and swim more or less like a fish does. And the image you see in the middle between the two larvae there is actually showing the extendable lower mandible of both dragonflies and damselflies. They basically hunt with that. It's spring-loaded, and they can deploy it extremely quickly and catch prey with that lower mandible. So it's a pretty potent weapon to catch small insect larvae like mosquito larvae, black fly larvae, also prey up to and including the size of a tadpole or small fish, especially if the dragonfly larvae or damselfly larvae are larger themselves. So that lower lip is a killer. When dragonflies or damselflies have completed their larval stage, they emerge on the edge of the water and break out of their old larval skin, as we see happening here, and leave that old larval skin behind, which is called an exuvia. And then after they emerge, here's a bunch of exuvia, including that rare species that we saw in 2013 at Blackville. This is actually from Blackville, this picture. And the little one in the middle there is called a pygmy snaketail. It's a species at risk in Canada, pretty much only found in New Brunswick and one site in Ontario. It may be found in Quebec. They're doing a dragonfly atlas right now, so it's to be seen, or to be awaited anyway. You can actually figure out which dragonflies are living in a water course by their exuviae, and actually it may even be a better source of data, in that dragonflies can migrate or can travel long distances, and we'll get into dragonfly migration later. But if the exuvia is there, it means that dragonfly is using that water course and completing its life cycle. Whereas if you find an adult somewhere, it may just be passing through and not using the water source. So after they emerge from that larval skin, they are quite shiny and not fully colored yet. It can take up to 2 weeks for them to get their full colors, and they are very soft and very fragile in those first hours especially, but up to a day or more, and you wouldn't want to handle it even by the wings when they're teneral like that. But generally speaking, the best way to handle a dragonfly if you catch it with a net is by the wings, unless it's teneral. And here it is about 2 weeks later in full color, the same species, a Maine snaketail, and they can be extremely colorful. Dragonflies and damselflies have the most accomplished flight pretty much of any insect. Certainly they attain the highest speeds, and they can hover and fly backwards. And they can also fly tremendous distances. The longest migration of any insect known, nonstop migration, I should be clear about that, because monarchs do travel longer distances, but they don't fly nonstop. Dragonflies, a species of dragonfly that we find in New Brunswick, the wandering glider, actually migrates from India to Africa across the Indian Ocean nonstop. So it makes the trip in several days to several weeks, and it can't stop, because if it stopped, it would end up pancaked in the ocean. So that migration is continuous, and it is the longest continuous insect migration on Earth known to this point. Odonata are predators both as larvae and as adults, and they eat pretty much anything they can catch. So here we have an azure bluet female chowing down on a small moth, a veneer, I believe, and they can eat prey their own size and even larger at times. So their jaws are quite strong. And odonata is actually Greek for the toothed ones, with a reference to their mouthpieces, and they have strong jaws. So if you ever were taught certain myths about dragonflies and damselflies, they certainly can't sew your eyes shut or sting you, but they can give you a good pinch, especially the larger species, with their jaws. If you got into a situation where that they certainly won't go after people to bite them, but they can pinch you. If you catch one in a net and you're not careful when you're trying to get it out of the net, I have been pinched a few times before, but thankfully not by the big powerful ones. I've been more careful with that. And this is our largest species of damselfly, and here this one is eating a big caddisfly. So why are insects particularly important? Well, they important ecologically. They eat insects. They're relatively high in the food chain. Their eyes are the most complex in the insect world. And because of their aquatic lifestyle, they can certainly be sensitive to disturbance and environmental degradation. Despite their ecological importance, we still know comparatively little about them. We're still finding new species on Earth. We're also getting pretty much new species every year in New Brunswick even. And we found a brand new species to science way back in 1993, right here in New Brunswick. They are excellent bioindicators of the indicators of the health of the environment, and many species are likely at risk, so possibly also endangered. A little background on their size. So the smallest of our dragonflies and damselflies is the elfin skimmer in New Brunswick. It's also the smallest of the odonata in North America, and it's only 2 centimeters long, which is less than an inch. And if you do that with your fingers and look, that's not a whole lot bigger than a housefly. Actually, probably about the same size. And then this biggest dragonfly, it's actually tied in first place with one of the darners. The dragon hunter is 8 centimeters long, or what is that? 2.5, 3.5 inches. It's pretty big. And it eats other dragonflies. That's why it's called the dragonfly, the dragon hunter. But it also eats just about anything it can catch. I did see one on what's that? There's a road on the northwest Miramichi. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It'll come up later. But anyway, it had caught a monarch and it was eating a monarch butterfly. So that's and the monarch looked a little smaller than the dragon hunter. So to give you a quick rundown of species, I won't stay too long on each species, but we have about 40 different species of damselflies, and they come in every color of the rainbow. So let's have a closer look at those. The first group of damselflies are our biggest damselflies. They are the jewel wings. We have 4 species in New Brunswick, including the ebony, the river. Here's the ebony jewel wing, our only species with all black wings. The river jewel wing with 1/3 of the wing darker. The superb jewel wing, which is the largest damselfly in Canada. It's actually bigger than most dragonflies as well. And it's got the last quarter of the wings amber colored. And here's one eating the caddisfly. And a recently discovered jewel wing, actually called the ruby spot. It's a spectacular damselfly with metallic red thorax and 4 wings. It's found in the southwestern corner of New Brunswick, but it does seem to be spreading north. So it may show up in the Miramichi one of these days. That's the American ruby spot. Another group of damselflies are the spread wings. And as I mentioned earlier, they're different than most other damselflies in that at rest, they have their wings spread out, sort of at a 45-degree angle. And we have 9 different species of spread wing damselflies. So the emerald spreadwing is our sort of most boreal species, and it's found not just in North America, but also in Europe and Asia. And then you can distinguish some of our species by the shape of their claspers at the end of the tail. So here I've got a nice illustration showing 4 different species of spread wings with their claspers, the male's claspers. And the spotted spread wing, which is usually our last species of damselfly on the wing in the fall. It flies until early November, and they're out now. And then the slender spread wing, which is a species that doesn't have the pale tip of the tail, so it's a little bit easier to distinguish than most just by sight. And then 2 species that are more or less restricted to southern New Brunswick, southwestern New Brunswick, the swamp spreadwing and the elegant spreadwing. And then our biggest group of damselflies are the pond damsels, 35 species. So I don't have pictures of every one of them, but I will go through some of the better known ones. The eastern red damsel is probably our smallest damselfly. It's only about 22 millimeters long, so or 2.2 centimeters, so only slightly larger than the elfin skimmer. And it's found in cold seeps. So if you have a ditch with a water source or a spring, cold spring, it's a good place to go looking for these little red damselflies, but they're surprisingly hard to see despite their red color. The dancers, we have 2 species, the powdered dancer and the violet dancer. They are found along rivers and larger lakes. The powdered dancer and the violet dancer are only purple colored dragonfly or damselfly in the Maritimes here. And it really is a striking species. And it's possibly still flying. They fly till late September, early October, so somebody might still find one on a river one of these days. The Aurora damsel, wonderfully named in English anyway, damselfly, and it really does look like a sunrise or a sunset. If you look at this, the side of the chest there, a gorgeous, gorgeous damselfly. The subarctic bluet, which is one of our rarest species, it's much more common in the muskeg in the north, in the boreal forest, but it is known from a few spots in New Brunswick, and actually it was located in a new spot just this past summer. This one is from Stewart's Bog along the Renous Highway, and Stewart's Bog is not an official name, but it's a bog just past the halfway in on the, if you're heading towards Plaster Rock, it would be on the right side of the road. It's a floating sphagnum mat and a place where Stuart Tingley found some really rare species, including this subarctic bluet. He found that way back in 1997. So this was the first time I'd ever seen one, way back in 2001. And the taiga bluet, which is much more widespread, sort of a blue and green mix to this color, to the color of this damselfly. Gorgeous, shiny little damselfly. It's in the genus, the same genus, the subarctic and the taiga bluets are both in the same genus as the majority of the damselflies in Europe. But here we only have two species from this genus, Synagrion, whereas most of our bluets are actually in another genus, the genus Inalagma, which are the American bluets. And even though they're called bluets, they come in every color that you can imagine. Most of them are blue, and you have to tell them apart by looking at the tail, the claspers at the end of the tail. This one is the azure bluet. Here's the boreal bluet. The Thule bluet, which I've never seen in New Brunswick, but it has been seen apparently down towards St. Andrews, and more recently it's been found in southwestern Nova Scotia as well. It's one of the species I've never seen. The familiar bluet, which is also another very late flying damselfly. I've seen one as late as November 8th at Fundy National Park, so they're still on the wing. I saw one yesterday, actually, at McLaren Pond in Fundy. Quite a large bluet. The northern bluet with a close-up of its claspers. So that's how you distinguish the boreal from the northern bluet, is the shape of the claspers. And you'll see more claspers coming right up. Here's the marsh bluet with its C-shaped upper clasper. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, which is often found in similar places to where you find the Hagen's bluet, which has very different claspers, but they look the same size and shape, color. Here's the stream bluet from the Barnaby River, just a tributary of the Miramichi, and the first place I ever saw one in New Brunswick. And the skimming bluet, which is a more southern bluet, but it is spreading north and being found in more locations now. And the little bluet, which is a coastal plain specialist. It can be distinguished from other bluets by its royal blue shoulder stripe, and again by the shape of its claspers. So this royal blue compared to the rest of the body having turquoise, it's a really striking little damselfly. And now we get into bluets that are not blue. We have the orange bluet. It's got quite a mite load on it here, and the mites are phoretic, meaning that they're just hitchhikers. They're not really affecting the damselfly too much. And the Vesper bluet, which is so named because it really comes out only during the last hour or so of daylight. So this was photographed with a flash after 8 o'clock on the day after Canada Day, way back in 2008 at Morris Mills down in Charlotte County. What a gorgeous little damselfly. And our smallest damselflies are the sprites, two of which we have in New Brunswick. We have the sphagnum sprite, which is found in bogs, and the sedge sprite, which is much more widespread. And then two forktails. Actually, we have 4 forktails now found in New Brunswick, but the two more common ones are the fragile forktail, which is still considered endangered, although it's probably going to be downlisted because it's showing up in more and more places. And the eastern forktail, which is not just our most common damselfly, but probably the most widespread and common odonate in the Maritimes. It's got more records than any other species on iNaturalist and otherwise. So this is a male. The females actually change color, so it can be quite confusing. If you find an old female, she's this ghostly blue with green eyes, but shortly after emerging, she's bright orange with orange eyes. So she looks kind of like an orange bluet. We also have the citrine forktail, which is the smallest damselfly in North America. It's been found just west of St. John. And forktails are kind of special in that when the winds pick up, they actually will take to the air and let themselves be carried far and wide by the winds. So the citrine forktail is actually also the only North American damselfly known from Europe. It's shown up in the Azores, the Azores Islands, and mostly because of it was probably carried overseas by wind. So kind of like our wandering glider story, they can go long distances and survive. And actually, citrine forktails have been found on Sable Island as well. So those are the 2 spots they're known for the Maritimes. So here we jump into the dragonflies, and maybe I should take a little pause and see if there are any questions yet, and also get a little bit more water for my throat. Any questions so far? I have a question. Yeah.
So you're showing the male dragonflies mostly, or the male damselflies. Is it hard to identify females?
Yeah, so I haven't showed too many females yet, but I have shown a few. And the reason is kind of like with ducks, you see the males a lot more than you see the females. And the females are hiding and laying their eggs, and the males are defending a territory where the females are laying. So it's a lot harder to find females and a lot harder to see them. But I have been concentrating in the last decade or so to try to get pictures of every female as well, which is much further from getting as many of those as I have males, but working on it. So that's an excellent question. Any more questions? Is my voice echoing at all? Because I have my speaker on here. I tried my headphones, but they're not working. So I'm hoping that my speaker doesn't cause an echo.
Probably.
Don't clear the bell.
Okay,
We're
good.
good here.
Yeah.
Excellent. So here we go. We'll start with a group of dragonflies that maybe most of you are familiar with, which we call the darners, the family Aechnidae. They are the big blue dragonflies that are out in very good number at this time of year in particular. It's quite a spectacle to see swarms of them flying in early September, and actually, I've seen swarms of them later this year than I ever have before. More towards the last 2 weeks of September, I've seen hundreds and thousands flying over marshes in southern New Brunswick here. The name darner comes from that myth that dragonflies were the devil's darning needles, or that they would sew your eyes or ears shut, but they do nothing of the sort. But they are big, and they do have powerful jaws. So if you do catch a darner in the net to look at it, it's one of the groups that you would try to avoid their mouth parts, so that you don't get pinched. Although I have been pinched a couple of times by a darner, and I felt it, but it's not deadly pain or anything like that. It's a good pinch. You can pinch yourself far harder than a darner can, but it's surprising. And apparently the biggest darner, like the common green darner or the comet darner, they could take a chunk of skin with them if they tried really hard. So best to avoid. But they don't do it unless you've got your finger right in front of their mouth. So it's okay. You don't have to fear them. The best way to identify darners in the field, the best field marks that we can use, is the patches on the side of their chest. So I compiled a little mini poster here with 12 of our more common species, and you can really see that the markings on the side of their chest are very distinctive, and within the species not overly variable. So if you've got 5 black-tipped darners in your net, they all pretty much look the same. So they're good field marks. And the common green darner has the whole side of the chest lime green, and most of our other species have blue stripes, which is why they're often called the blue stripe darners or mosaic darners. And we do have a couple of species flying in the fall that are brown with yellow markings, the ocellated and the fawn darners, the genus Boyaria. So another group to look for, but mostly looking at the patches on the side of the chest, you can tell them apart. So most of the pictures I'll share with you are taken in that way, so that I was able to ID them or share them as ID photos. So the Canada darner and the lance-tip darner have very similar shaped patches on the front, but the lance-tip darner has these almost look like footprints going down the side of its abdomen, and the Canada darner, it's more like little Pac-Men drawn on the side. And I also find the Canada darner, its first thoracic stripe looks kind of like Nova Scotia. So I guess that's an appropriate comparison for given where we are. And then I just skimming through the different species. The mottled darner is found in southern Nova Scotia and southwestern New Brunswick. I've never seen one. So here's a nice picture of one from the internet. But there are people in New Brunswick who have seen them, including Jim Bell, who goes by the name JD on iNaturalist, and Jim Bell and Gail Taylor and Dwayne Sabin and Scott Makepeace have all found mottled darners in New Brunswick. And I was hoping to get to southwestern New Brunswick this fall to see them, but no such luck this year anyway. The variable darner is in French, it's called Echne domino. It kind of looks like domino spots on its chest, although you occasionally find one with the spots connected, so it's good to look out for. And also showing a male and a female here together, You note that the male is blue, but the female is kind of yellowish rather than blue. Although the females in the darners, they can come in different color forms. So the female can be in the yellow form, or the green form, or the blue form for the variable darners. And I've found every kind in New Brunswick, so we have a good mixture of colors. So in this case, the females are potentially more colorful than the males, which is unusual for dragonflies, but and they're nicely in the wheel position here. Here's the sedge darner from Europe, and the sedge darner is an endangered species for the Maritimes because it's a boreal species and very, very uncommon in our area. But where it's been found in New Brunswick is basically in Mount Carleton Provincial Park, and I believe in a large bog north of the Renews Highway. So if somebody finds sedge darners elsewhere, we'd certainly like to know about it. They're probably on the decline because they are a boreal species, and boreal species are being pushed north, just like Canada jays and boreal chickadees. They're becoming less common. There are a few other species like that in the Maritimes that are becoming less common, and the sedge darner is one of them. Here we have the lake darner and the zigzag darner, both species that are kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum in size. The zigzag darner is a tiny darner, about half the size of the lake darner. Lake darners also fly very late into the fall, so I've seen one on October 31st, and it likely flies into early November. Zigzag darners are earlier in the summer. They start flying mid-June, and they fly into early September. So they're pretty much done, I would say. And the black-tip darner and the shadow darner here, side by side, because they are quite similar. But if you look at the shadow darner's first thoracic stripe, it looks like a cane, an upside-down cane, or a hockey stick if you're looking the other way. Whereas the black-tip darner does not have sort of a top break or curve in the stripe. So that's the difference between the main difference between the two. The shadow darner, as its name suggests, really does like to fly in the shadows. So it flies closely, almost after dark. So I'm noticing we're already at 7:15, so I'm going to speed up the slides a little bit. The green stripe darner and the subarctic darner are bog specialists. The colors are quite spectacular. And this is a female green stripe darner, actually. So when you're looking at the end of the tail and there's no claspers, that helps you distinguish that it's a female rather than a male. The springtime darner is out in the spring, as is the harlequin darner. So they start flying by about mid-May and fly pretty much until the 1st of July. Most darners are fall species. And here are two other fall species that are along rivers and very dark colored, and they also fly into the dusk light. So I bet you could still find one outside right now as the dusk is falling. The common green darner is tied for first place in size, and it's also a migratory species. It flies at this time of year. If you go to Grand Manan, you can find hundreds of them going through Grand Manan and taking off over the ocean on their way south, and they can even be tracked on radar given their numbers, similar to monarchs, and they may even feed on monarchs in flight. They'll probably fly to Massachusetts, have another generation, and then fly to Florida, and overwinter in Florida and have several generations in Florida, and then start flying north in the spring again to sort of hopscotch like that, leapfrog rather, north. We do have another species of anax, which is the genus for the common green darner. And there was only one record of it up until last summer in the Maritimes, and it was just a site record. But last summer during our bio blitz at Fundy National Park, caught a comet darner at McLaren Pond, and you can see how large a dragonfly it is, and what a beautiful combination of colors, the red and the green together, almost like Christmassy colors. It is spreading north slowly and showing up more often in Maine, and it's now shown up twice in the Maritimes that we know of. It's probably elsewhere. Here are several more darners in flight, and if you can get them from the side, you can identify them. So the clubtails are a large group of dragon species, many of which are uncommon to rare, and it includes some of our rarest species, including the pygmy snaketail, which we'll talk about shortly. One thing to mention about clubtails, it contains our largest species, the dragon hunter, and most clubtails, their eyes do not meet on top of the head. Is there a question? No? Okay. Here are a couple of species that are quite small. So our smaller species of clubtails, the northern pygmy clubtail and the southern pygmy clubtail, which so far it's only known from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in Canada. So it's a pretty rare species in Canada, the southern pygmy clubtail. The least clubtail is quite tiny, and it can be told by its little white claspers at the end of the tail. The lily pad clubtail has really spectacular claspers, and it's only known from southwestern New Brunswick so far, spreading to Fredericton, and it really does hang out on lily pads quite a lot. Here's the mustache clubtail, which is a pretty common species in the Miramichi watershed. So all these pictures are taken from southwest and northwest Miramichi, the Cairns River. It's where I saw the most mustache clubtails in my life, and all different life stages here, adult stages, I should say. The spine crown clubtail I've only ever found as an exuvia at Blackville and other spots in the Miramichi, but it is becoming more common in southwestern New Brunswick. So a species to look out for sure. And ways to distinguish the mustached and the spine crown between females here. Just the shady colors. That's a diagram by Tony Thomas, Dr. Tony Thomas in Fredericton. And a lot of sort of more dingy colored clubtails, like the beaver pond clubtail and the harpoon clubtail and the lancet clubtail. And here's the dusky clubtail. Now we get into a few of our much less common clubtails that really have their wear their name well. They really do have clubtails. So the cobra clubtail here, and the endangered in Canada skillet clubtail, which is known from pretty much just the St. John River watershed below the Mactaquac Dam and around Grand Lakes. So it has recently been found in Quebec, but up till then it was only known from a single historical record in Nova Scotia a single historical record on the Ottawa River and the St. John River in New Brunswick. That's the only places that were known for Canada. Now, finding it in Quebec, it may become its status may become less than endangered. We'll see. And the group of clubtails called the snaketails, which are lime green and bright yellow and black, some of my favorite dragonflies, and one of which is an endangered species as well in Canada. So here are 4 other snaketails, and then yet another one. We have 7 species of snaketails in New Brunswick, including the extra striped snaketail that has an extra stripe on the side of its chest, which spends most of its lifetime in the treetops, which is why as an adult, so we don't see it very much. And then the pygmy snaketail, which is a species at risk in Canada, a species of special concern, most common along the Miramichi between Blackville and Dopetown. So that's pretty much the heart of its range in Canada. And here it is with the nice amber patch in the hind wing. So this one was from Blackville, New Brunswick, way back in 2007. Jim Edsel and I worked the whole summer of 2007 looking for this species on the Miramichi and on the Macadavic rivers, and we found it in a dozen or so locations on the Miramichi, and one location on the Macadavic, and since then it's been found in a few more spots in New Brunswick, but definitely a rare species in Canada. The only other place known for Canada is in the Rainy River district of Ontario. So here's a nice picture of the female. And some more spectacular clubtails from the Barnaby River here, the black-shouldered spiny legs, male and female. The zebra clubtail, and I should point out here that another species of Stylurus dragonfly was recently found at French Fort Bridge. Is that the name of it? There was French Fort River. Yeah, it was just found last year in the Miramichi. So brand new species for Atlantic Canada, and just found in the Miramichi. So the Miramichi is a really good spot for a wide diversity of dragonflies. A small group of dragonflies called the spike tails. The females have spikes on the end of their tail to jab their eggs into the mud. So here are 2 females of the 2 species of spike tails we have in New Brunswick, the twin spotted and the delta spotted. And the delta spotted was photographed along the Renouse River right here. So, and here are the males, which don't have a spiky tail. The cruisers, or macromids, include the string cruiser and the Illinois River cruiser, or also known as the Swift River cruiser. So that one was photographed along the southwest Miramichi. I'm trying to remember where it was, but it's near one of the famous fishing lodges. So anyway, that's the Swift River cruiser. The emerald dragonflies, a big family containing 22 species. Their connecting feature is pretty much their emerald colored eyes. So we'll zoom through those, but they're kind of like the Jaegers of the dragonfly world. So if you like going on pelagic trips for pelagic birds like Jaegers, you'll love to looking for emerald dragonflies, because most of them like bogs, which is kind of like going on a pelagic tour in a way, in that it's wild and wild and woolly sometimes when you're in the bogs. Anyway, here are quite a few different emeralds. Probably our most common emerald, the American emerald, the petite emerald, which is quite rare in New Brunswick, but relatively common in southern Nova Scotia. The racket-tailed emerald, which has a kind of a club tail, if you want to go that way. The Prince basket tail, of a spectacular large dragonfly, which has nicely colored wings. They cruise at high altitude. When I say high altitude for a dragonfly, it's maybe 100, 200 feet above the ground. But you can tell them apart because of the colors in their, tell them from other dragonflies because of their colored wings. So it's helpful as an ID feature. And here's the basket tail dragonfly, the beaver pond basket tail, spending lots of time aloft, and a common species in the spring. And other basket tails here. Basket tails are called basket tails because the female sort of has a basket to hold her long string of eggs, which she drops from midair. So it's kind of neat to see. The Euler's sun dragon, one of the most beautifully named dragonflies, even though it's not necessarily a spectacular species, it's got a wonderful name. And the broad-tailed shadow dragon is a really spectacular dragonfly, and it's the species of dragonfly that was discovered in New Brunswick in 1993 by Paul Michael Brunel. It's called a shadow dragon because it's one of the few dragonflies in this genus. It flies just during the last half hour of daylight over the river, and my only encounter with an adult broad-tailed shadow dragon was actually at Metapanagia at Red Bank at the Oxbow, and right there at the Heritage Lodge around 9:30 at night. I was there with Jim Edsel, and I think at least one of the evenings Nelson Cloud was with us, so we that's where we saw our first shadow dragons. So pretty neat story. Paul Michael Brunel discovered the dragonfly from its exuvia and then went back the following year at the Canoe Stream down towards St. Stephen and found the adults. And here's a picture taken by Stu Tingley the following year during the Dragonfly Society of the Americas meeting, which was held for the first time in New Brunswick that year because of this newly discovered species of dragonfly. So a really fascinating species. We're getting close to the end of our species. Here's a lake emerald, which I found at the Halfway Inn, which is one of the only spots, the ringed emerald, which is at the Halfway Inn along the Rouge Highway. It's one of the only spots known for New Brunswick for this species. So in your backyard, kind of. The lake emerald really does fly along lakes, and this is the most gorgeous picture. It's actually in the Dragonfly Guide for Eastern North America. Stu's picture of the lake emerald. And the Quebec emerald, which was only known from Quebec until 1997, was found by Jim Edsel on the New Scotland Bog in 1997. And since then, it's been found in a few more locations, including Minnesota and Maine. It's one of the rarest species of dragonflies in North America. And the muskeg emerald is only known from Cape Breton Highlands and the Renouse Bog in the Maritimes. Species I've tried several times to go find, but never managed to get. And it's probably becoming more rare as well, just like the sedge darner. This is a boreal species. And then the striped emeralds, you'll see a lot of different striped emeralds up in the Miramichi. And a really great site we found was Wayerton Road along not too far from Sunny Corner. Yeah. So every one of these emeralds that you see from now on are found along the Wayerton Road in the spring or into midsummer. So the delicate emerald and the Kennedy's emerald. Here's one emerging from its exuvia. Shortly after it's out of its exuvia, before it gets colorful eyes, and then one of the earliest to emerge, and then a full adult from the New Scotland bog here. And the Forsypate emerald, and the the least emerald, and the Incurvate emerald, and the Williamson's emerald. They can all be told apart from the shape of their claspers at the end of the tail. Williamson's emerald here with pretty hairy claspers. Clam-tipped emerald, which is more common to the south of us, but becoming more common now. This was found in Wayerton, and the brush-tipped at Shinnickburn. The ebony bog haunter, which is one of our earliest dragonflies in the spring and occurs in bogs as well. And our last family of dragonflies are the skimmers. So I hope you're not pounding nails yet or falling asleep, but we'll go through the skimmers rather quickly here. The elephant skimmer, the smallest species in North America, the size of a housefly. The male is, as a mature male, sort of a nice powdery blue, but the female is a bee mimic. And if you can imagine it from her picture here, slaty skimmer, sort of a slaty blue dragonfly that's becoming more common now in New Brunswick and spreading north. The 12-spotted skimmer up till the mid-90s was really only known from southwestern New Brunswick, but now I understand it's been found in the Miramichi, and I found it in Couchibouguac in 2012. So it's definitely moving north, and it's another species that can migrate. The 4-spotted skimmer is found all over North America and Europe and Asia. So it's a widespread dragonfly. The white corporal is a more southerly species, but spreading north as we speak. The common whitetail is a very spectacular dragonfly, which is one of the better studied species. The female can lay 2,000 eggs at a sitting and can probably lay eggs 5 or 6 times in her adult lifespan. So it's definitely a prolific species. And the chalk-fronted corporal is perhaps the most common dragonfly along lakes and beaver ponds in New Brunswick, so a super common species. The blue dasher is a species that's from the south, but it has been found in increasing numbers now in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, so it's moving in. And then the white faces are a spring group of dragonflies, which all have a white face. So we'll see a few of the 6 species of white faces here: the frosted white face, and the crimson ringed white face, and the Hudsonian white face, pardon me, and the dot-tailed white face. We also have the Canada white face and the belted white face. The seaside dragonlet is unusual in that it lives in salt marshes, and it's the most tolerant of species to salty water. It can actually tolerate water that's more salty than the ocean in some of these salt pans. The map on the south was from 2015, but now we have seaside dragon that's also in New Brunswick, and they're certainly known from the southern coast of Nova Scotia as well. And they've been found in 2 locations in southwestern New Brunswick so far, around the Musquash Marsh and so on. The black meadowhawk, this is from the Miramichi as well, the Renouse Bog, north of the Renouse Highway. And this time of year is definitely the right time to see meadowhawks. They fly late into the fall. The last meadowhawk on the wing is called the autumn meadowhawk, and their latest record in the Maritimes is November 25th from Campobello, just a couple of years ago. So October is a great time to see different species of meadowhawks, including the black meadowhawk and the saffron-winged meadowhawk, like you see here. And here is the cherry-faced meadowhawk, the white-faced meadowhawk. It really does have a white face. And the band-winged meadowhawk with those nice amber-colored patches in the wings. And the autumn meadowhawk, which is our only meadowhawk with paler legs. If you were paying attention, all the other meadowhawks have black legs. The autumn meadowhawk has yellow to tan to brown legs, but not black. And it has the latest record in the Maritimes, November 25th. I bet in the next decade we'll find one in early December. The pennants are super spectacular species. We have the calico pennant, which is bright red, and the little heart shapes on the abdomen. For the male, female has yellow spots instead of red. Here's the Martha's pennant, which is a little bit less colorful. But then we now have the Halloween pennant, known for New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. And it may well be the most spectacular dragonfly in North America. And it is moving north. So it's been found along the St. John River and so on. And our last 2 species are the most migratory species in North America, the wandering glider, which is the same species that can migrate from India to Africa across the Indian Ocean. And our own wandering glider migrates south from Grand Manan in the fall. You can see large numbers if you go birding on Southwestern Head, for example. You could see hundreds on certain days in September. So, and certainly a dragonfly that could show up on if you're out doing pelagic bird watching, you get a wandering glider land on the boat. And the spot wing glider, which was really abundant this spring, in June and July, into the early summer, and it's also a migrant. So that's the end of the species, and my rambling on about species of dragonflies. But if you have questions or species to show, I'm going to end the share here and entertain questions if you have some. So
I'll start off. Was it just my judgment, but the last 2 gliders, their wings look proportionately larger? Is that logical?
yes, absolutely, and they're really good for gliding, and so kind of like an albatross or a hawk, they don't flap their wings very much. They can glide really well and take advantage of the wind currents. Yeah.
Another question I had, a lot of the species are very, very similar, tricky to separate in identification. Is the exuvia an easier way to identify a species?
The exuvia, you may need to resort to using a microscope, but some of them are very distinctive. So with a little bit of practice, you can actually identify them pretty quickly. And for species that are cryptic, that hide in the tops of trees and so on, the exuvia are definitely a better way to record them. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
To identify dragonflies, if someone wanted to learn about or try to identify dragonflies, is it better to have a camera? Is that kind of the only way that you could properly ID them, is to have a picture?
No, I mean, having a camera to record the images allows you to go back and especially if you manage to get good pictures from different directions, like if you take a shot from the side and shot from the top, that can be really helpful. It's still the case that collecting specimens of dragonflies and damselflies is used a lot, and there are many reasons for that, in that we can use their DNA to see if we've got a different species hiding out that looks very much like another one, and so on. But I don't collect too many species anymore as specimens, although I will collect a few every year, just to especially the ones that are hard to identify from pictures, and also collecting, like picking them up with a net and then taking a picture from the side and from the front and so on. By holding it in your hand can be an excellent way to record all the features that you need. But people in museums will tell you they're still really interested in specimens, and there's definitely a case to be made for collecting specimens as well. I just like taking pictures of them when they're alive, and because their colors are so much more vibrant and interesting, and but it can be quite a task for sure. You can definitely identify dragonflies using, just binoculars and not taking a picture. I generally identify it before I take its picture using binoculars, or even just looking through the camera. I know what I'm looking at with 25 years of doing it. But close focus binoculars are really useful for dragonflies and butterflies and so on. I hope that answers your question. Are there other parts to that? Or I could also talk a little bit about identification guides. There's going to be a real doozy coming. The Peterson Field Guide to Dragonflies and Damselflies of North America is due out any year now. I say that a little bit facetiously. But the gentleman who's writing it, Ed Lamb, started writing it way back in 2006 or 7, and he came to New Brunswick that summer in 2007. He came to the Miramichi. Actually, he went to the Renous Bog, and he also came to Cushibugwak, and he got some specimens from here. He is an amazing illustrator, and but he's using Photoshop and he scans live specimens, and then he tweaks them digitally to make them more representative. Or so he's using his artwork, because he's the author of a damselfly field guide, which was all in paintings. So he's got the artistic chops to modify scans using live specimens. So he's been showing many pictures of that over the years. But he was paid by the Peterson Field Guides for 10 years, but it's been longer than 10 years that he's been working on it. So it's definitely going to be an amazing field guide. He's a super perfectionist, Ed Lamb is, and can't wait for that. But in the meanwhile, we have a couple of decent guides that are out there. Maybe the very best one for our region is, oddly enough, the field guide to dragonflies and damselflies of Algonquin Provincial Park. And I might have a copy of it nearby. I'm just going to take a quick look here. If not, you can certainly find it online through the Friends of Algonquin Park. And the other field guides I would recommend are the Princeton Field Guide series, the Damselflies and Dragonflies of Eastern North America by Denis Paulson. That came out in 2010 or 2011. It's a photographic guide. The photographs are a good size. They're larger than the earlier field guides, but they're still not quite big enough to make it easy to use as a field guide. And I say that even knowing that some of my pictures and Stu Tingley's pictures are in there, and Jim Edsel's. I wish the pictures were a bit bigger, but those are probably the two best field guides you can get for Odonata in Eastern North America right now. There's also Dragonflies of the Northwoods and Damselflies of the Northwoods, which are made for Minnesota, Wisconsin, and so on. They're little field guides, but they're really well illustrated. And the pictures in there, even though they're tiny field guides, the pictures are bigger. They take up the whole page. So they actually are better for field guides. So that's 3, I think.
Is there a good online source?
Yeah, so the Dragonflies of the Northwoods is it's the field guide series, the fauna and flora of the Northwoods. They're out in Minnesota, and there are definitely online sources that you can use. I use iNaturalist a lot. Gilles Béliveau, who's a well-known birder in the Maritimes in New Brunswick, he made a wonderful site called the Odonata of New Brunswick. It hasn't been updated in a while, but it's still in pretty good shape. It's a great source for our species. Beyond that, there are quite a few other websites that track the dragonflies and damselflies of North America. So Odonata Central, all one word. That's possibly the best place to upload your sightings. It's the most wide-ranging site. But failing that, iNaturalist is pretty darn good and has, well, several, more than 10,000 records now for the Maritimes. So it's got all our species that we know of so far.
So if you have a picture and you want it identified, upload it to iNaturalist, and
yeah,
the experts will come along.
Exactly. So to maximize your chances of getting an ID, if you can get a picture from the side and from the top. The side is probably the most important view for most species, especially if you can see the claspers if it's a male from the side. And then after the side, it's probably from the top. That's next most useful. But if you just take a picture from the top of a darner, for example, you likely can't get an ID from the top. It really needs to be from the side. And but sometimes you can't get it from a fully lateral view. So a lot of my pictures are sort of semi-lateral, semi-dorsal, so like a 45-degree angle looking at it. And I try to get all the bits and pieces showing. So that helps, but sometimes it's not possible from a picture, no matter what.
going to go to gallery view here. And I'm wondering if anybody else has a question, either here or online.
I have a question, Peter.
Yes,
Denis, I see dragonflies in the forest, and I notice that they perch on. They don't like stuff with needles or leaves. I shouldn't say that categorically, but where I tend to see the most is on dead branches on material that's laying on the ground.
Okay,
And I'm wondering if with the plantation, there's not much dead material.
right.
And are the populations tend to be driven? Do they tend to be driven out of monocultures into other forested areas that have a lot, some wind throw and dead trees with branches?
That's a great question. Certainly dragonflies try to choose places where they get a good, they hunt with their eyes.
Yes.
So they need a good field of view.
Yes. Yes.
They certainly will perch on tree trunks. If the tree is alive and it's a conifer, they don't like to perch on species that have a lot of sap because it gums them up. But it's not impossible to find them on tree trunks and branches in the forest. But I think you're right to say that they perch on the ground a fair bit because they're solar powered, and being on the ground, if they need heat, they're going to get it from, especially in the summer when the sun's almost straight up, they're going to be there more often, and that'll help them heat up. As for monocultures, there's not a lot of insects to eat in monocultures, and one of the reasons they would be hanging out in the trees would be to hunt for insects nearby. So I can easily believe that they would be scarcer in monocultures for that very reason alone.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
I have a question. One time I was cutting a hole in the ice on a small pond, and the ice was really clear, and embedded in the ice there were quite a few damselfly larvae.
Oh.
And afterwards I thought, I wonder if I had thawed out some of those pieces of ice out of the hole, whether some of them might still have been alive. Do you know anything about freezing tolerance? And
yes, so that's a great question, and certainly dragonfly and damselfly larvae can tolerate being frozen. Some of them dig down into the mud deeper to avoid being frozen solid. And so certainly some are more freeze tolerant than others. So one example I could give is the autumn meadowhawk as an adult can tolerate -8. And so that if there's been a hard frost in November, maybe a couple of nights in a row where it gets down to -8 or -10, the season is done for me, for adults. But if they find a microclimate, they might survive a few nights more. There are definitely damselfly and dragonfly larvae that can survive being frozen, not too solid, let's say. If it gets to the point where they have antifreeze in their bodies, but it only has a certain limit depending on how much antifreeze they have. And there is a species of damselfly in Northern Europe, 2 species actually, that are out in the winter, even in Northern Europe, like in Denmark and Sweden and so on. And it can definitely it emerges when the temperature just goes above zero a few days in the winter, but it can be active below zero. Like we don't have the equivalent in North America, but there are two species in the genus Sympecma, Sympecma, that are super tolerant to the cold, to the point that they're actually called winter damselflies. And they're out in colder temperatures than our dragonflies or damselflies ever would be. So it would be worth trying. If you ever have that happen again, I would see if you defrost them, if they're still alive. I bet they are. I bet some of them are.
I understand that there are no true Arctic dragonflies. So if you get above tree line, if you see one, well, I guess, these days with climate change, there's Inuit have reported seeing a stray dragonfly here or there, but it comes as a shock to them.
Yeah. The further north you go, the longer it takes for the dragonflies to become adults. So some of the same species that we find here in New Brunswick, the shadow darner and the lake darner in particular, they live in the tundra, in Arctic ponds, but the larvae may take as many as 6 years to become adults. And there's a similar story with the woolly bear caterpillar, the Isabella, what we also call the Isabella tiger moth, but the woolly bear up north, as a caterpillar, might take 11 years before it becomes an adult moth. So some of our dragonflies that complete their life cycle in just a year in New Brunswick may take up to 6 years in the high Arctic to become adults. And there are some parts of the tundra that have dragonfly species that I know of. I don't know what is their actual northern limit. I'm gonna have to go, because of your question, I'm gonna have to go see where they stop. But I know they have certainly been found on Baffin Island and so on. So there are limits to how far north they get, but it takes them longer and they're probably less abundant, but they certainly have an abundant food source in the mosquito and midge larvae. So some of them do well up there.
Also, I guess the guides that you were citing, they're probably all to the adults. So are there good resources for the nymphs and exuviae?
There are a few, and I wish I had more myself. There's a really good book by Ken Tennyson that goes through the larvae of dragonflies. Trying to remember the title of it, but I think if I run across the house here, I could show you the Dragonflies of North America, one of the earlier versions of it, the 2003 version of it. And it's by 3 authors. It'll take me less than a minute. Hang on one sec.
So, you see, you blurred, an option is to blur the background so that you only see the speaker. So there's a little bit of a conflict. This, I think, is on the back of the chair. Every once in a while, it looks like he's coming out of Nate's ear.
Yeah,
But that's,
it looks like it's a wolf.
Yeah. Is it a wolf?
I think so.
Yeah, it could be. Okay.
All right. Here's the Dragonflies of North America. I know it's backwards, but yeah, it's by Needham, Westfall, and May. Let's see if I can.
Hold it to your face. That's a come out of focus. Bring it out a little more. It was out of focus.
Yeah, so I'm going to remove the blur from my background too, I think.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And Needham, Westfall, and May are the authors. And there's a new version that came out in the 2010s of this book, and it's got a lot on the larvae and the exuviae too. So it's not just a key. It has some natural history and but it's a, you know, it's a brick of a book.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's somewhere around $200, but so is the larval guide by Tennyson, I think. And if you want to learn more about the natural history of dragonflies, this is really great. It's Dragonflies, Behavior and Ecology of Oronata by Philip Corbett. And the equivalent exists for the damselflies as well. So there's the Damselflies of North America by Minter Westphal and Michael May. And this is the more recent version, and it came out in 2006. So not that old. Yeah, so there you have it. Any more questions?
Melanie, you have a question?
No, this was an excellent presentation. You had wonderful imagery and lots of super explanation.
Oh, thank you.
No, I'm really impressed. I volunteer for PEI is just a conservation guardian, and I have a large 200-acre property with bogs and stuff. And I don't know a lot about damsel and dragonflies, but meadowhawks, but I keep taking pictures and putting them on iNaturalist. So this was fascinating. Like, I think PEI should reach out to you and you give them a little presentation to their nature group just for fun.
PEI has an amazing resource for dragonflies and damselflies. And
Is that Gerald?
It's Bob Harding. Do you know Bob Harding?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, Bob. Very good. Yeah, he did do one. Good job. I missed it by some chance, but no, thank you very much. That was excellent. I'll be honest, I tend to attend the Nature Miramichi ones because the PEI and Nature Miramichi are both on the same night.
Oh,
I'm from Newcastle. Thanks.
Okay, gotcha.
Another question, Denis, on the dragonflies are sort of king of their world, you know, as far as a predator goes, but what preys on the dragonflies?
Oh, maybe our most avid dragonfly hawks here would be the flycatchers, the larger flycatchers, such
Okay,
as the
yeah.
kingbird. Kingbirds
Uh-huh.
definitely
Yeah.
go for dragonflies. I've seen olive-sided flycatchers when they were more plentiful, also really like dragonflies. Kestrels and merlins for sure. Watched a merlin, just it was a younger merlin, I think, just practicing at chasing dragonflies in a swarm by Swallowtail Light on Grand Manan. We must have been there almost an hour watching this merlin chasing and not catching, but definitely it was more like it was practicing, not trying really hard to catch. It was amazing. And kestrels and merlins both definitely like dragonflies to eat.
Now, considering dragonflies are quite maneuverable and fast, do the birds sort of apply fighter pilot tactics like coming out of the sun or diving from their behind?
So yeah, that's a great question. Dragonflies' vision is the best vision of all insects, apparently. What best means is kind of up in the air because some insects see into the ultraviolet and like bees, for example.
Yeah.
But dragonflies, in terms of like fighter jets, they see almost 360 degrees because their eyes are so bulbous. They see
Yes. Mhm.
pretty much almost behind them and upwards and downwards, and they have many concentrated spots in their eyes that are like multiple pupils almost. So their eyes are, especially facing downwards, they hunt from above, their eyes are extremely sensitive, and yeah, almost 25,000 individual lenses or facets
Yeah.
in the eyes. So
Mhm.
Unbelievable vision. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking maybe of a strategy that the bird comes in behind, drops down underneath, and flips upside down and grabs.
Yeah. And another thing is that dragonflies are pretty vulnerable when they're teneral. So I was mentioning that a female common whitetail can lay 10,000 eggs, but if only 2 might survive to adulthood. So that means an awful lot of food for an awful lot of predators. And different birds have learned that when dragonflies are emerging in mass,
Okay.
they can gorge themselves. Grackles and crows and red-winged blackbirds along ponds. Boy, do they ever pig out on dragonflies when
So
they're
that may be the strategy, then wait till they're most vulnerable and then pick them off.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
No problem.
It's Melanie here. I, on a rare, only 2 times rare, I saw in Nova Scotia, the Mississippi kite and on PEI, the swallow-tailed kite
Wow.
grasping dragonflies and grasshoppers in flight and eating them in the air.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Well, I when I was in migration spots like Grand Manan, you'll definitely see birds picking them off when they're in big concentrations like that. So I'm trying to remember other instances where that happened, but certainly at both ends of Grand Manan, kestrels and merlins and probably swallows would go for smaller like damselflies and so on, and definitely swallows hunting over ponds will catch damselflies and even smaller dragonflies quite often too.
Another thought I had, Denis, on could a bat be successful just at dusk in picking off a dragonfly?
Yeah, so we have few species that are dusk specialists in the dragonflies, but I would not be surprised at all if bats were really out and hunting for, so say, the shadow dragons or the shadow darner or the vesper bluets. Absolutely. And when bats were more numerous, definitely so. And we also know that bats migrate, and they migrate not only at night. So they could potentially catch dragonflies and butterflies and moths while they're like bats are bats and moths evolved together, especially the species that we have in our region. I'm pretty sure all 7 of our bat species in the Maritimes feed mainly on moths, but there are dragonflies that are quite abundant at dusk and even into the dark. Like I know people who bait or not bait, but do moth lighting. Nelson, you might comment on this, but you may have gotten dragonflies come to your moth light, right? So I've seen them certainly hanging out under street lights and so on well after dark. So I can imagine bats would catch them better too.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've wondered whether you had tips. Is there a particular time of day that's best to go out and try photography? I was thinking maybe the cool of the morning they might be less active, and so it might be easier to get a photograph.
That's absolutely true, and you can get some pretty spectacular pictures if you find where they've been spending the night. For example, if they're covered in dew, a lot of photographers literally go out to look for species that are covered in dew because it makes for a really spectacular picture. There are also other photographers who will mimic the dew and use a spray bottle and like cool down a dragonfly in that they caught with a net, and then bring it outside and spray it before it heats up. And that I'm not somebody who's ever tried that, but I know it is a possibility to do and to get really nice pictures that way, but it's kind of a mounted picture, right? So there are definitely different periods during the year where dragonflies are more prone to hovering. So sometimes I'll go visit a pond and see if there are any individuals who are hovering a lot, and then I'll try to get flight pictures. So a lot of the flight pictures I showed you in the show were mostly taken at the pond at home over the years. So darners seem to have different periods where they hover more, and usually on a day that's not too windy and there's a good diversity of insects around. They're hovering, waiting for something to take off or to come into their field of view, and they don't pay attention to you. And sometimes they also do pay attention to you. They come and check you out and hover in front of you. So that's pretty neat too. I really do like flight pictures, and basically just roaming around a pond or at the edge of a river or something like that. You're going to find perched individuals, and if you approach carefully, slowly, you may end up getting a nice picture. So yeah.
Okay, are there any?
Last question, we thought we saw a stench down there, and we had an expedition out off the CI road way up Gordon Meadows, but that was before your presentation, so we took
I'm
it.
guessing it's wrong.
We took it, yeah, it's probably wrong, so we took it from the back, one of our club members. We didn't know that he was side view, even though it was perched lovely on this conifer for a long time. So
It's
probably not that.
it's not impossible, especially given that you're in the Miramichi. But from the back, it looked like it had pretty big spots on the abdomen. So that leads me to think that it might be something like a Canada darner or a lake darner instead. But I'm really not sure. I can't say yes or no from a dorsal shot most of the time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Corrected on our post.
Well, Denis, I don't know if there are any other questions, but boy, I feel like being here in Miramichi, we're in the center of the action, dragonflies, and there aren't any that fly at night, are there? So I don't want to fly on the way home. But I'm glad to hear that October can be a decent month too. So I'm going to try and slow down my bird watching and start looking more for dragonflies and damselflies. So I thank you very much. It was a very lovely presentation, very enjoyable, and I think everybody enjoyed it. I'm going to go to go.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated.
And I'd invite you all, if you have questions, to reach out either on Facebook or email. I'm happy to share my email, or on iNaturalist. I spend quite a lot of time looking at dragonflies and helping to ID them. So you feel free to tag me as NB Dragonfly Guy, and I'll do my best to respond. And if I don't respond when you tag me again, because sometimes the tags go missing, but you can contact me through the messaging on there too, and I'm happy to take a look. And there are others like me, like Jim Bell and Derek Bridgehouse and other people in the Maritimes who do look at the dragonflies being posted, and sometimes we're not there for a few days, but we'll get to it. We'll get to it. So, yeah.
I'll be doing a follow-up email to this session, and I'll include this information for those that aren't here as well as those that are. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you again. Excellent.
Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you.
Uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I hope to be back up in the Miramichi looking for dragonflies again one of these days. So I'd love to join you doing that sometime. So hopefully
Might be
in the
nice
coming
to
years. Yeah.
leave a club outing somewhere. We can meet you in Blackpool or something. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, thank you. Okay, so.
All right.
Thank you, Knight, and I will end
All the
meeting.
best. Okay.
All the best.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.